You've been hearing us talk about imperial yeast for a while now, and that's because we absolutely love this stuff. With 200 billion cells in each pitch-right pouch, we rarely even need to make starters these days. Unfortunately, not everybody has the access to imperial yeast those of us out here on the West Coast do, because they're based out of Portland, Oregon. But things are about to change. Imperial Yeast is excited to announce the opening of their East Coast location, which is huge for those who want the freshest yeast possible with the best pitch rates, but brew on the other side of the country. They're going to start by offering their four most popular strains, A38 Juice, A07 Flagship, L13 Global, and GO3 Dieter, with the goal of providing their full lineup of yeast by mid-2021. So start your planning now at imperialyeast.com. The history of boozy beverages is incredibly vast and has evolved quite a bit over time. Those of you listening to this show likely focus primarily on beer because that's what we talk most about, though many of you probably dabble in the creation of other alcoholic drinks as well, like wine and cider, perhaps even distilling spirits. Indeed, these are all viewed by most as normal, though in the last few years, something new hit the scene that has become far more popular than I think most of us thought it would. You're listening to the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and joining me on this episode to discuss our unabashed views on hard seltzer is contributor Andy Carter.
Like you said, I brew mostly beer, but I've done wine. I've done maybe a cider once, long time ago. But this most recent takeover, we had these new beverages because I think craft beer grew so quickly, so fast.
Yeah.
Hazy IPA, these trendy beers that got a lot of diversion. Now hard seltzers, the ultimate thing to crap on. Here we go. Let's get into it.
Yeah, the ultimate thing to crap on. It is the new thing that people can, I guess, invest their hateful energy into now that hazy IPA is accepted, I think, worldwide. Yes. Like most novel things in the world of booze, hard seltzer is something that folks hold some pretty strong opinions about. I actually remember the first time I learned this was even a thing. I believe I told the story in a past episode where Jersey offered this newfangled alcoholic water to my wife during a swim party at his house. Never in my wildest imagination did I think the whole hard seltzer thing would become what it has today. And like most, I definitely have some opinions on it that I look forward to chatting about with you, Andy. This is going to be a fun one now. Just a quick word of warning. This is a Brews Views episode where it's our goal to share our honest thoughts on a topic with as little censorship as possible. We're not terribly crude dudes by any means, but we may use more salty language than usual in this episode. If that bothers you, consider yourself warned. All right. If you enjoy this show and you'd like to make sure it sticks around, consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy at patreon.com/Brewlosophy, where in return for making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished recipes, unique discounts at Yakima Valley Hops, and an invite to a monthly live Q&A session with someone in the brewing world. For this month, that guest is Nathan Cooper, who is the owner and head brewer of Wandering Hop Brewery in Yakima, Washington. I may not fully understand what it is people love so much about the hazy IPA thing, but I'll tell you, Nathan makes a mean one and has ample experience brewing with wet hops as well. Plus, he's just a standout guy. It's going to be a great session. I'm really excited for it, and I think you'll all enjoy it as well. In order to get in on the action, you have to make your pledge at patreon.com/Brewlosophy by December 18th, 2020, as Nathan will be taking questions on Saturday the 19th. As a patron at this level, you'll also have access to all past sessions with guests like John Palmer, Russian River's Vinny Chilurzo, Grandmaster BJCP Judge Gordon Strong, and many, many more. Another really easy way to support us is by using the links found at brewlosophy.com/support. When you're shopping online, your experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral. All right, feedback is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who offer brewers beautiful stainless gear such as the turnkey BH15 pilot brewing system, which has a hard plumb manifold to eliminate all hosing changes during the brew process. Brewers Hardware has a ton of unique, purpose-built products useful to both professionals and home brewers. Go see for yourself at brewershardware.com, and don't forget to mention Brewlosophy at checkout to receive a free gift. That's brewershardware.com. Listener Peter Weishampel, I think I'm saying that properly, wrote in with some feedback on our last Brews Views episode where we talked about brewing with adjuncts. Mm-hmm. Peter says, you said that a cream ale has to have corn. I think you meant in your opinion, as a lot of the format of the show was said to be based on opinion. Anyhow, you went on to name examples, Genesee and New Glarus. New Glarus at one time was brewed with corn. corn, but I believe it has been several years as they address in a FAQ. They answer a question about corn syrup and clarify that spotted cow is brewed to the standards of the German purity law. That is with only malted barley, malted wheat, hops, yeast, and water. So if you like spotted cow, perhaps corn is as important as your bias has led you to believe.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think we're really getting to the point of these styles have their origins and things, and corn being used as an adjunct in light lagers or lighter beers to lighten a beer, but you can still make a perfectly light beer with no adjuncts whatsoever, depending on how you mash it, your yeast, and so on and so forth. So I think, yeah, we're absolutely right. That's a blind spot in our thinking of cream ale, but in general, that's how cream ales have been brewed, and that's where we're coming from in that episode.
Yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole on this one because it's just a tough one for me. First off, Peter, you aren't wrong. The whole purpose of the Brews Views series is for us to share our opinions. That's why we started it. That said, and I honestly don't know the right answer to this, is a cream ale if you don't use corn? At what point does it just become a blonde ale? I mean, and that's the problem. Then again, this is coming from the dude who has no issue calling a Pilsner that was fermented at 66 degrees Fahrenheit or 19C, a lager. But it seems like that's the whole issue with styles, right? It is that if you don't do it exactly how the very first one was brewed, then can you still call it that style? To me, a cream ale is just so incredibly close to two other styles, but what makes it unique is the use of corn, and I know some people like to use some rice in theirs as well. You take that away, and it really does start to border on just a blonde ale, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think, here, this is the place where styles, we use them as home brewers to try to target something, enter competitions. And then the most important thing is, and what also professionals do, is market how the beers, we think it is. There was a podcast where the guys at Ballast Point were on, early on in Ballast Point, they did a Kolsch. They called it a Kolsch. No one knew what the Kolsch was. They call it the blonde.
Yeah.
Sells like crazy.
Yeah.
So again, part of it is marketing. We want to be as honest and as transparent as possible in our brewing. But hey, if you got to call it a cream ale because you think it's creamier and you think that fits well, I think that's also true. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, well, and then there's the other side of the coin where call it what you want, who cares, and I get that, and that's why this is a tough topic for me because I kind of don't care, if you serve me a brown ale and it tastes like a Schwartz beer, but it was brewed in your mind as a brown ale, but maybe you just did something different and it didn't work out, but it tastes like a dunkel. We'll call it a dunkel.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking that, and it tastes to me like a dunkel. I have no problems with you saying that it's a dunkel, even if you fermented it with Chico at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't bother me. But at the same time, a cream ale just seems so normal and important and a part of that historical style to have corn in it. So it just doesn't make sense to me why we would hang ourselves up on that, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know what to think about it. You're right though, Peter. It was just an opinion, and I guess that's my opinion. If New Glarus has ditched corn and they're still calling Spotted Cow a cream ale, doesn't bother me. I've had Spotted Cow a few times now, and I think it's a really good beer. So more power to them, and to those of you who want to brew cream ale without any corn. Who cares? Call it what you want. All right. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or drop us a line on social media. All right, so this is typically where you would hear my friends Jersey and Tim review a listener-submitted beer, and unfortunately, we don't have one for this week, but I am so excited to announce that we finally got a review date scheduled, and starting next week, we are back in action. The guys are going to review a whole handful of beers that you guys have sent in to us. I do apologize yet again to those who spent the money on getting their beers in here, and we just haven't been able to get to reviewing them yet, but they have been stored in my fridge. Everything is good, and we are all set. So again, Jersey and Tim will be back starting next week. When we get back from this short break, our unfiltered views on hard seltzer. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you.
Compact and simple to use with a small footprint for brewing indoors, the Grainfather makes it easy for you to brew professional quality beers at home. The Grainfather is an all-in-one brewing system that lets you brew all grain beer in a single, compact stainless steel unit. It uses an electric heating element and pump to maintain a constant temperature and to circulate the wort during the mashing and cooling stages. It also comes with a counterflow chiller to reduce chilling times and produce high-quality wort. And now, with the addition of their conical fermenter, the Grainfather takes things one step further by offering homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation just like commercial breweries use. And with the Grainfather Recipe Creator and Connect app, you can easily design a recipe, sync your brewing system with your phone, and then just sit back and relax as the app takes over and assures that you maintain your scheduled mash temps and boil schedule. Head to Grainfather.com to purchase your all-in-one brewing system today and to sign up for their free recipe creator tool. Once more, head on over to Grainfather.com, that's Grainfather.com, and get started today.
Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD, that's BRUPOD, at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. If my memory is accurate, it was the summer of 2016. Jersey was hosting a neighborhood swim party at his house that my family was attending. The guys showed up early to pre-funk a bit, and we drank commercial beer off of Jersey's taps. That's usually what we do. When my wife showed up, she came to the bar. My wife does not like beer, so Jersey asked her what he could get her. And as she was thinking about it, he excitedly proclaims, "I've got something you have to try." If you know Jersey, he's very easily excited. So now, this is just kind of his thing. He bends down to his beer fridge, and I'm thinking, what the hell could he possibly be getting that he's so excited for my wife to try? My wife drinks vodka soda. Well, he comes up with this skinny can of something called White Claw that he handed to my wife. "There's no way you won't love this. It's just like LaCroix, but it'll get you drunk." and that was my introduction to hard seltzer.
Yeah, I think similarly, I had not done too much, not maybe in the last few years more than not, more mixed drinks and stuff. I've mostly been a beer guy, wine as well, but beer. And so liking mixed drinks, I've seen different iterations of, these canned cocktails and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
But like you said, I at some point someone had a White Claw and I saw it. I'm like, oh, interesting. Because what my memory went back to immediately was in the 90s, Zima.
Yes.
Which was a clear malt beverage. Very similar, not too dissimilar, but different marketing and stuff like that.
Well, so I remember that as well. Back right around when I was in high school, and you're trying to figure out whether you're going to be a beer guy or drink the other stuff. Zima was popular. Smirnoff Ice. Remember Mike's Hard Lemonade?
Mike's Hard Lemonade. Yep.
Yeah, and I remember these were super sweet drinks to me. Yes. I don't drink them now. I can't remember the last time I had any of those. Well, I did get iced a few months ago.
Sure.
Last year.
Oh man, I don't know if many people from grad school listen to this podcast I went to. I would ice people all the time. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. I look back, I still think it's about 80% as funny as it was, but it was still very funny.
Oh, we were it was actually last Christmas, and I walked into, we do a neighborhood Christmas exchange, Christmas gift exchange where I live here, and I walked into Jersey's house, and hanging from a lamp as I walked in was this wrapped gift.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I was like, wow, this is great. So I grab it, and I open it, sure enough, freaking ice. Nonetheless, that does feel like that was those sweeter, more acidic, really, drinks that weren't beer, but they were still a malt beverage. That was kind of the start of this drift towards non-beer, non-booze necessarily, drinks that were. I don't know how to talk about this in a way that it's not going to. I don't mean to offend anybody, but for people who don't appreciate malty, hoppy, bitter beers. They were trying to capitalize on this other market, and that was the start. They made these sweet, acidic drinks that were easier, quote unquote, for people to drink. And over time, I mean, you start to look. I was thinking, man, what was it? What made this White Claw company, who I believe was the first, what made them say, we're going to make sparkling water boozy?
Well, I did a little digging before this episode because I think this is a really fascinating topic, because not only for how much like vitriol it has in homebrew groups, but the process of like how these things came to be. Because beer, we talk about all the time, thousands of years existing in some way, shape, or form, more codified in the last hundreds of years. But these beverages, first like in the 90s, these things were fermented malt beverages, which is essentially a nice way of saying it's been completely filtered beer. You make a light beer, you filter all the crap out of it so it's clear, and then you flavor it. Okay?
Right.
You do that because the taxes on adding straight alcohol to water are much higher, and the equipment is different. So if you have a process to kind of make beer, then you can just do whatever you want to it. Which is really interesting was up until I found the date, because the AHA or the BA released a book recently about how to make hard seltzer, because this is so popular I had to write a book about it.
Right.
They do break down the law, and in about 2008 is when the federal government in the United States said you can have sugar from grains, just sugar, not barley, be beer. So now the taxing for, if you have a beer license, type 1 or type 23 manufacturer in the state of California, if you can make beer, you can make it from wholly and only from sugar and stuff, not fruit, because that becomes a wine, but just cane sugar, corn sugar, what have you.
Yeah.
And that was what prompted all these changes. So I think if you trace a line from Zima to Mike's to White Claw, and White Claw is the Mark Anthony brands, they made Mike's Hard Lemonade too.
Yeah,
so
right.
They already had a foot in the game. So I think you see this trend. And and another kind of side of this, you had mentioned very sweet. I don't find White Claw very sweet because there's no really added sugar. I think that's because of the backlash to soft drinks like Coke and Pepsi and stuff with so much sugar. You get this new beverage that's like lighter, nice. Oh, LaCroix, okay, cool. It's got booze, sweet. So there's all these things.
Right.
All these things come together to make this one thing work, and that's what you get.
And people are making bazillions off of it now, and
Yeah,
it blows my.
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I remember my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law and my sister live in Berkeley with their kids, and I remember him coming. They came to town 2-3 years ago, and he had this fancy-looking can that I asked him what it was, and it was a LaCroix, and he said, yeah, it's just flavored water, sparkling water. And at the time, that was such a foreign thing. Like, I don't drink soda. So I stopped drinking soda back in, 2005, 2006. Just too sweet, does nothing for me. But I thought, well, that sounds kind of a nice, refreshing way to not, drink calories and sugar. And sure enough, I mean, my wife and I go through case after case of sparkling water. My favorite is bubbly currently. But we drink the crap out of it. I can't help but see the connection between White Claw being huge and coming on kind of on the heels of the boom in sparkling flavored water.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, you have the Soda Stream, and then all these other ways of adding carbonation at home. I know you do it, and I'm actually drinking it right now. You take your keg, fill it with water, add some grapefruit juice, bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah,
you got seltzer on tap, right? So, and I drink a ton of Spindrift. So, if the Spindrift company listening, you can send me a shirt whenever you want. I drink so much Spindrift, but that being said, I don't, like you, Marshall. I mean, I drink soda, but I'll have a Diet Coke once a month, but almost never anymore, right? When I was a kid, maybe in high school, college, I was drinking a lot of diet sodas because I knew the calories, but at the same time, the soda stuff, it just doesn't work for me, and it's terrible for all those other reasons. But don't drink it anymore. So, but I love seltzer. I like the carbonation, the bubbles, the little acidity. It's fun, and it's like, I can't imagine how you just add carbonation or carbon dioxide, and it's infinitely better than just water for somehow. I don't know how, but it's infinitely better than just water.
I had a mentor that makes me think of this time I was doing my internship, and he and I had similar kind of philosophical views on things, and so we'd shoot the shit and just kind of talk about weird one-off things. And one of the things he told me once was, I absolutely hate water. He hates the flavor of water, the way it feels in his mouth. He's like, I force myself to drink it so I don't get dehydrated. It just there are people out there who I guess just don't like the flavor of what I consider to be a relatively flavorless drink, water. But that's the nice thing about these sparkling waters, and the flavor adds another zest, another kick of flavor. There is really nice to make it drinkable. Now when you think about hard seltzer, obviously the market, I think, brands like Bud Light now and Coors Light and White Claw are targeting are people who are concerned with their health or with fitness, or they're all, it's very well advertised how many calories are in each can. And that is, I mean, as an aging male in America, where we're not known for being the skinniest lot, it is kind of a big deal to be able to go and drink this whole can of White Claw with however many percentage points of ABV of alcohol in it, and not be too guilty about it at the end of the day, compared to an IPA, which can pack 400 calories per pint.
A double IPA, easily.
So it makes sense to me that people would glom onto this who are looking to have a good time and party and but not want to worry about their waistline, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and the other part of it is the word beer has so much baggage in marketing. They were trying to go away from that. The other alternative for people that were liking beer, but they wanted to cut calories, was like the Ultra series, like Michelob Ultra.
Yeah.
All these things that were basically, if you look at, you okay, cool, it's 100 calories in a can, cool. But yeah, it's also 3% alcohol. There's all those other limitations to it. So if you want to get away from that completely, Seltzer's easy. And they positioned it, I think, like you said, all these confluing events, health, a healthy-ish lifestyle, the 100-calorie mark, good, high, strong, impactful flavors, those kind of things all come together to get what you see today.
Yeah. Well, and then you contrast the whole White Claw thing, which is, they have so many great flavors, all fruity flavored. My favorite's mango. You contrast that with the flavor. I don't mean to diss people out there who love Michelob Ultra. I'm a Miller Lite guy all day long. Only 96 calories, by the way. Michelob Ultra, I ran a half marathon. Worst mistake I've ever made. I'll never do it again. I didn't feel proud afterwards, nothing like that. It was a bet. My wife bet me that I wouldn't do it. You know how we are. And so I ran this thing, and at the end, they were giving out Michelob Ultras. I've never known that to be a thing for runners. It was the most god-awful tasting beer I've ever had. It was absolutely horrendous. I would crush some White Claw after a run, though. I'll tell you what.
It's just basically water in the end, right? So it's, what do you want after exercise? A glass of water, during, after, before, all the time. So that makes sense. I think I try to stay as fit as possible as well. I got, now with COVID, I'm not running, I'm not out and about anymore. So I got a stationary bike. I do that. Try to watch what I eat and things like that. For me, I just build the beer around my lifestyle. I can absolutely see it if I was like, well, I need these options and stuff like that. And, I do like some of these White Claw flavors, but in the end, I still have that, desire to have a beer. So, but I've also tried to make lower alcohol beers, just because, just like you, Marsh, I'm getting older too, and a little bit of beer some nights goes the wrong way, and then then you have a problem. So,
well, I think it'd be ignorant of us to not talk about an elephant in the room when it comes to perspectives on hard seltzer. And this is not, I'm going to be right up front, I don't agree with this, but I feel like, again, it'd be stupid of us to ignore the fact that this is often viewed as a more effeminate beverage, right? That it's a girl's drink, that it's made for that target market. And in a weird way, it's almost, if I'm ever caught in a photo with a White Claw can, I get made fun of for it. You know what I mean? Not just by dudes out there. I mean, my aunt makes fun of me for drinking White Claw. So, and I just think it's kind of to me, it's stupid. I mean, when nobody's walking around, I don't hear anybody walking around saying beer's a dude's drink,
I think there's one thing, we saw this, this could be apocryphal, but there's the show Mad Men, and during one of these episodes, Pepsi comes to the marketing company and says, we have a diet drink for women, right? Immediately that's what they say.
Yep.
Right. And it's incredibly, it's just ridiculous to do those things. I mean, yes, it's a marketing thing and that's what they're going to do, but putting those kind of things is, for me, when I hear those kind of things, when you have to basket or try to bin people, it just doesn't make any sense, because now you've just completely turned off parts of your market.
Exactly.
If you're a business person, if you're like a true capitalist where you want to sell as much things as possible as quickly as possible for the most profit, why would you turn off half of your audience? And I will say this about White Claw, especially in these seltzers. I think this time around, in terms of how everything is proceeding, I think it's right down the middle, 50-50 who's drinking these. I don't think it is only a segment of the population drinking these. I think it's cutting across everyone.
Oh,
So,
I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you this, and here's one big opinion that I'm going to let drop. When another guy is making fun of somebody else for what they're drinking, and especially using the whole using the that it's feminine or something as the put down, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I'm talking about you folks out there who want to make fun of us for even talking about hard seltzer. I can't help but see your massive amount of insecurity in your own manhood, man. It seems so petty and so stupid to care what somebody else is drinking to the point that you're going to call them out for not being as manly as you. It's dumb. It's absolutely dumb. So do it. I don't care. To me, you're just holding up a sign showing that you're the one who's actually insecure in yourself. So
just a mirror.
Yeah, it's dumb. Obviously, my opinion is that it's not a girl's drink. In fact, I drink quite a bit of White Claw, and I feel like in the same way that beer is not a guy's drink. In fact, most of the women that I hang out with that I know like beer. My wife's not one of them, but that's okay. We all have our preferences, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, there is an argument to be made for the fact that a lot of the hard seltzers that are out there are being made by big beer, if you will. And if you want to hang yourself up on that and you're concerned with all of that, then by all means, I'm not going to judge you for that. I think that's more of a political view than it is anything else, but go for it. I don't have a concern with that too much. I mean, I'm going to spend the same amount of money on all the craft stuff that I do anyways, while also buying White Claw because I like it. So
yeah, it's interesting because the White Claw came in. It was like kind of that time, that 16, 17 time when it kind of blew up, and they were kind of caught off guard because then they were selling it and then selling it so well, they were selling out and like losing certain flavors. Cause I think there was a lot a lot of people were like, oh, I need the mango or I need this. And I don't want any other flavors. So they'd call places they'd run out. But I mean, obviously with Anheuser-Busch and all these other companies seeing a bit of a, that's hard times for these multi-billion-dollar multinational companies. They need more portfolio.
Yeah.
They said, okay, let's start making seltzer. So that's why it took a few years for them to roll out. But I think it's interesting, like I said, I don't drink a ton of them. I've made some at home, which we'll talk about later. But, it does seem that there's a large swath of what people would say is preference even in the seltzer market, because we've talked on chats within the group. There's certain ones you really like and certain ones you're like, oh no, this is just terrible. So it's interesting to hear that, because you would think this process is like one and done. There's really only one way to do it, but it doesn't seem to be the case at all.
Yeah, no, it's true. Now I think it would be fun, and let's do this actually. Let's break down the different hard seltzers that we've tried and share our opinions on those. I actually shared this opinion on social media a few months ago, and boy, the backlash. The people have some strong opinions about which hard seltzer is the best. And just an aside, there is kind of this, you mentioned, we are going to talk about making hard seltzer here in a bit, but on the commercial scale, I remember being really confused as to how the booze was getting into the water, whether it was a spirit being blended with water and flavoring, whether it was fermentation. My understanding is that the good majority of hard seltzer manufacturers out there are fermenting the sugar, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. So like I said earlier, there's a lot of legal issues. And if we're only focused on the United States market, because I think anywhere else is going to be completely different,
right.
But we know the U.S. market the best. With these law changes, the TTB, ABC, the federal government said you could just use sugar. So the simplest way is if you have a manufacturing facility that can make beer, it can make these things. But then you have to think about other factors, the quality of the fermentation, nutrients, what yeast, all those things. So it's all the same stuff you'd worry about in beer. And then, okay, you're left with a pale, very pale, not completely clear, but a pale alcoholic beverage. It probably has some fermentation characteristics. You need to strip that out. So this is where the heavy manufacturing comes in. Like, okay, I got filters. Do I have carbon? Do I have membrane filters? How do I get it to just be clear? And then it's clear, and then you flavor it or you back sweeten it. Now, there is definitely places that, if you have a big enough facility, okay, well, now I'm going to goose it with some alcohol, because I was reading the federal law. You can actually tweak with alcohol, like full alcohol, your final beverage. So I think there is a wiggle room there. It's not a lot of room, but there is some other wiggle room, because there's craft brewers that, have these oak chips or bourbon barrels, and then, the alcohol gets raised or changed a little bit, and they have accepted that. So there's a few things there. Again, this is not legal advice. This is me just reading stuff on the internet. But it is the federal government's website, so let's take that for what it is. So in the end, these are fermented beverages. If you want to call them beer, I would put those in air quotes, but that's what it is.
Well, so you look at a White Claw can, and they advertise, I believe they call it Taste Pure, their Taste Pure process.
Pure.
And I mean, we've been talking about White Claw a lot. I think that's only natural because of the fact that they were kind of the first to blow this thing up. And I really do like White Claw. I got a whole bunch in my fridge right now. I drink it regularly. I think it tastes good. What I really enjoy about it, probably from their Taste Pure process, is the fact that it tastes the most to me like carbonated water. It's just simple. Yeah. There's no other flavors there. Now, I remember when Truly first came out. We're going to break down our thoughts on these different versions of hard seltzers here. We mean no offense. These are personal opinions of ours. When Truly first came out, I really liked. I found appealing their different lineup of flavors, and one in particular, pineapple, sounded really good to me. Well, my wife had gone out with some girlfriends, came back and was like, "Yeah, that Truly, it was not good." She said it tasted earthy to her, kind of dirty. Well, I hadn't had one yet, and we were at a football party last year, so this is fairly recent. And I popped it. Somebody brought some of the pineapple ones. I was pretty stoked to try it, and I thought it tasted pretty good. So I crushed that one pineapple one, and I move on to another one of the flavors. I think it was some cherry flavor or something. And sure enough, man, my wife nailed it. It tasted like it was mixed with like mud almost. That flavor, it wasn't thick or brown, but it had that weird earthy flavor that you get from some like English hops that it just did not work for me.
Yeah. And I think this is just a root of either, I think you don't want to add those flavorings until when you're done. So you have that first stream process and you break it into parts. And I think that could be, if it's the same producer and it's a little bit different between them, that could be what they're adding to it. And there's some weird reaction. In the end, if you get enough of the flavor, then you don't pick it apart as much. But then again, someone else might like it, and then that product still succeeds. So it's so interesting though that they have that kind of that flavor. Just seems like an off flavor to me, like a big one. But I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you. So we were when Bud Light first dropped theirs. We're Bud Light and Coors Light kind of dropped their hard seltzers around the same time. If I remember this right, and so we were trying all of those, and I'll tell you, the Coors Light ones are tolerable. I still get that same flavor. It's just lighter. The Bud Light ones are god awful in my opinion. And I know people who love the Bud Light ones.
Yeah,
possibly for that reason. To me, what it tastes like is when if you've ever fermented like a blonde ale, something real pale, not very hoppy, not very characterful, but you leave it on the yeast cake just a bit too long. It's still drinkable. It's not going to kill the beer, but there's this yeasty, earthy and dirty are the two best ways that I can describe it.
That just sounds to me like autolysis or something.
Something like that.
Like Vegemite is like a spread that they have. But it's just yeast, right? So it's like they're trying to add. What they're trying to build a flavor of that. That's so weird though. That is wild. Okay, interesting.
Well, so I'm gonna just go down to the other ones I've tried so far. So Coors Light, again, it's still got that flavor in my opinion. It's not as strong, but I'm not going to be buying that one. Bud Light, again, god awful. One of the worst ones that I've had. The Corona ones are, in my experience, I believe they might actually be sweeter. I think they like back sweeten them with something.
Yeah, or they could do the not xylitol. It's there's the one that's unfermentable, basically,
like Splenda or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Put something in there that will always be shelf stable. I mean, again, this is high manufacturing. They can make it shelf stable if they wanted to, but that might be a nice way of doing it. So
yeah, the Corona ones are like, I'm not gonna buy them. They're a bit too sweet for me. The flavor's fine. Some of my absolute favorite ones are I believe they're more difficult to find. One of them is called High Noon. If you've never had a High Noon, they are really, really good, and they have really good flavors too. They're a bit more expensive, and I don't know who makes High Noon. I don't know if it's a craft thing. I don't know if it's big beer trying to cover up, make them look more crafty. But they're very, very delicious, and I'm almost certain with High Noon, it's actually vodka and sparkling water with juice or flavoring of some sort. Regardless, it's one of my favorites. And then another one I had the opportunity to try when I was up in Yakima last year, in 2019 for Hop Harvest. Somebody brought in, they knew that I liked White Claw, and so somebody brought in a whole bunch of cans of this stuff called San Juan hard seltzer, and they had really cool flavors like Fuji apple, and oh my god, they were so good.
Yeah, so what's interesting is you have the base, the generic kind of seltzer thing, and I think that's been well covered. What I'm really more interested in is the craft development of it, because what I saw because you look, I go to mostly to Trader Joe's because that's where I do a lot of my shopping, but the Vons by me also has like really good, usually really good alcohol selection, and they've reconfigured it many years, but now it's basically like a third of it is seltzer. But it's not just seltzer, and I don't want to spend too much time on the alternative flavored alcoholic waters like kombucha or anything like that. But what's interesting is, you get the base ones, but you get the craft ones where they're adding whatever is hot these days, CBD, coconut water, whatever. So that's so interesting. There's a new portfolio kind of being opened up by this space. And I just think when I've had I've had a few of these where they're more craft centric and less of the big seltzer centric.
Yeah.
Those to me always taste better, almost always. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, so I've talked about Crow and Wolf Brewing Company here a few times. They're about ready to open up. It's going to be incredible. And the guys are real good friends of mine. My wife knows them all. And we were over helping them build their cold room a few weeks ago at the brewery. And my wife brought the kids over. They get to run around the big warehouse and all that, have a good time. And my wife is talking to Brad, who's going to brew there. And Brad was saying, we are absolutely going to have hard seltzer on tap, which is exciting for my wife. And she has an incredible point. She goes, for those of us people who just don't enjoy beer, but we love people who do and who want to go to these breweries, it really is boring watching you all have fun drinking beer while we don't have an option.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because this is where craft beer really will make a kind of a different trend, or craft breweries will really set themselves apart in that regard from the bigger seltzer producers.
Yep. Well, and I feel like they have to. If they want to stay relevant, if they want to stay in business, they have to be willing to consider different things. Again, you look at the hazy IPA thing. Can you imagine if all of these West Coast breweries who were making fun of New England IPA when it first dropped just ignored it and decided not to brew it? They'd be out of business. I mean, you have to have a 5 different hazy IPAs on tap if you want to be around these days,
I think that is, it's true in the sense that you need to respond to the market. And I think everyone gets to respond differently. And that is not to say, and this is, I think, going back, this is a much bigger discussion of craft beer and commercial brewing and everything, and even your own brewing to some extent, is that you're allowed to you're allowed to respond and say, I don't want to participate in this. You're also allowed to say, I'm going to interpret it my way, which maybe for a German, like a strictly German lager producing brewery, well, we're going to do something a little different, still in that vein, and we'll talk about it in the same way, but it's our interpretation of it. So they still honor both your original like nature and the new thing. Yeah. Right? It took Firestone Walker years to make a hazy IPA. I mean, years. But they did it. And now they have like 2 of them, right? So it's how they want to interpret it, and that's how they talk about it. So,
and I'm almost certain Mind Haze is one of their top selling beers right now.
It is. I think it is completely. It is. 805 is obviously the big area code in the room, but that is, at least last time I checked, or last time I heard him on a podcast, number 2 maybe, maybe 3. Yeah,
you just got to do it. And the fact that these craft brewers are open-minded enough to embrace new things, I think is a good thing. Now, speaking of craft breweries who have done this, who have moved into the water market, if you will. Evil Twin, and I'm not sure exactly how they set it up, but I believe they have what's called their Evil Water series as well as their Evil Shake series. And I recently had a box of beer delivered from Tevoir, a really neat company that ships out. You pick whatever beers you want, they ship them to you. It's really fun because you get your hands on stuff that you may not get otherwise. Well, one of the beers that they included was this. They called it a pastry water made by Evil Twin. This water, was pink. It was strawberry flavored. It had lactose. It had energy drink powder mixed into it. It had vanilla. I don't. It did not taste like a White Claw. We'll put it that way. What it tasted like was a vanilla cream Red Bull. That was very, very fizzy. But I didn't like it. I give them credit though for taking what is popular in the beer world, which is this whole pastry sweet beer movement, and integrating that into this other popular thing, which is water. And my hunch is that it's going to be a successful program for them.
Yeah. Like Evil Twin, and there's also McKellar, the other side of that coin. There have always been, for what you can say, if you don't like them or whatever, or how they make stuff, beers with 1 billion IBUs, or Kopi Luwak, coffee produced stuff, they're always out out in front of things, and they're going to run through that brick wall first, or they tend to be first through it. And these things will probably stick because there's just so much energy behind them already.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go through all the trendiness of IPAs and stuff like that, and we thought, oh, this is the end. This is the end of this. This won't keep going on and stuff. But no,
Right.
these keep happening. So. I mean, these are good. This is good. Personally, I'm not going to ever have one. Probably ever. I'll probably try one once at a thing, but that's it. So if it's not for me, it's not for me. That's all I can say, right?
Yeah, and that's fine. And this is the point that I was trying to make earlier. If you don't like water, hard seltzer, pastry waters, pastry stout, New England IPA, that is perfectly fine. No one's trying to convince you to enjoy it. At least I'm not.
Yeah.
But when you try to convince people that they're fill in the blank because they do enjoy it, just grow up, man. That's all I'm saying. So now that we've talked about our thoughts on the whole concept of hard seltzer and established that neither of us are haters, that leaves us with the topic of making this tasty beverage. That's exactly what we're going to be focusing on after these messages. Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the Exchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to exchillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Craftmaster Growlers takes traveling with and sharing beer to a new level. Made from heavy-duty stainless steel, Craftmaster Growlers are double-wall insulated and can keep beer cold for up to 8 hours. Unlike typical growlers, Craftmaster Growlers come with a swiveling tap and fully integrated CO2 regulator cap, allowing beer to stay fresh for 2 weeks or more. The square design takes up less space and will fit in most refrigerator doors, and every Craftmaster Growler comes with a 1-year warranty. There are 64 and 128-ounce versions available over at craftmastergrowlers.com. The brew in a bag method has blown up over the last few years, and in that time, it's become very clear that not all bags are created equal. For the best BIAB experience, you have got to go with the Brew Bag. Made from high-quality, food-safe polyester, the Brew Bag is available in both 210 micron for standard brew in a bag, as well as 400 micron, which works beautifully for all-in-one recirculating systems. I've been a Brew Bag user for years and wouldn't brew without it. Head over to brewinabag.com to get the fabric filter that works for you and use promo code TBP17 at checkout to receive a discount. Again, that's brewinabag.com. With how quickly hard seltzer rose in popularity, it didn't take long for brewers to develop an interest in making, quote, craft versions of it themselves, which was unquestionably motivated by a desire to both stay relevant and, of course, capitalize on a trend for commercial breweries. But for us home brewers, at least those of us who enjoy hard seltzer, I think it became sort of like a new challenge. You know, there's something new out there to do. We've been brewing beer for so long. Ooh, it's something fun, something new to try. My wife and I are pretty big fans of vodka and soda, and we always use flavored water for our vodka soda these days. Usually it's like lime LaCroix or some other lime sparkling water with a couple ounces of vodka in it, and then I'll squirt some either lemon or lime juice in there. With some ice, it's pretty delicious. Well, to me, that didn't taste terribly different, and it didn't seem terribly different than, the White Claw and the hard seltzers that were getting popular at the time. And so when I finally got around to crafting my own hard seltzer to have on tap, I went probably the easiest route possible, which was basically making a keg of vodka soda. I used water, I used vodka, and I used some flavorings that I bought from More Beer. Now, I had to kind of open up a calculator and try to figure out just what would get me right to that 5%, 6% ABV mark. It's not terribly hard to do that, and there are calculators out there. But what I did was I blended 4.25 gallons of filtered water, that's 16 liters, a filtered water with 0.75 or 3 liters of 80 proof vodka. And then I did 2 ounces of blackberry fruit flavoring and 2 ounces of blueberry fruit flavoring. I was going for like a mixed berry flavor. And then for this first attempt, I actually added a whole bag of ice to try to cool the water off faster. I don't think that was necessary. It takes long enough for this stuff to carbonate properly that the ice was actually more of a hindrance. So I don't recommend using ice. Just use water. But yeah, I did that. I mixed it up. I shook it up real well. I carbonated it. And the following evening, I had this really sparkly, really good tasting, what I called Brew Claw. It was clean flavored because it was just vodka soda. There wasn't any of that weird, what I believe comes from the fermentation of the sugar water. There was nothing like that. Obviously no hops or anything. And it was good, and it got you buzzed pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah. So it's one question I had actually for that was, what do you think? It has the carbonation, it has the flavoring. Do you think the flavor feels sharp? Did it feel bright? Because I always wonder if is there a pH balance you need to meet for making that the best?
That's a really good question. Probably the one thing that I don't want to say I didn't like, because we drank the whole keg fairly quickly. But the one thing that I felt like could have really been improved on was that the fruit flavor was dull. It was absolutely not bright. And what I would do if I were to make this exact one again is probably dose the keg with, I'd probably go 15 milliliters of lactic acid or something like that.
Sure.
Just to brighten it up, provide that kind of sharpness that you get from a crisp fruit flavor. But that was one of the things a lot of people were commenting on was when I've tried this, and you got people who are doing vodka soda and then just adding the flavor to the pint glass,
Yeah.
And that was the comment that people were saying was, I get this, it's not a very bright fruit flavor. Well, I think that is a pH thing. Now, I haven't tried it, so I don't know. Okay. My wife, when I had it on tap, what she was doing was blending that with acid juice, with lime juice. Yeah, so it was still upping that acidity, which again, she really liked that. It really brightened that flavor
makes sense.
for her.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, it's a good process and it's simple. And I think that's the one thing, if anyone takes anything away from this podcast, we're not here to convince you that you should have seltzer or whatever, but explore the equipment that you already have in your house, your brewing equipment, for whole new tasks. Because I think you'll be surprised what you can get done with what you already own. I think that's a big thing. Yeah.
And now there are people out there, the real brewers, if you will, who looked at this and was like, this isn't even brewing. You're just blending stuff and putting it on tap. Hey, I'm kind of the mind of if do what works, and this worked for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason I wanted to start off by making it this way, one is because I do like vodka soda, and I wanted to see if it would work. Clearly, it did.
Of course. Yeah.
But the other thing is, I really wanted to avoid the whole fermentation process, and there were so many different theories or different approaches that people were talking about at the time to making hard seltzer using some form of fermentation. It just seemed too complicated, so I went with this easy route. That doesn't mean I won't ferment. Now, my understanding, Andy, you have done the fermentation method, and we're going to listen to you talk about it because I think it's very interesting. But my understanding is that there are specific yeast strains that are said to, I guess, impart the least amount of flavor to when you ferment these waters.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I approached this a couple of ways. One was it was kind of a challenge because I was like, okay, these is feasible. And the other part was, I have friends in the craft brewing side, and they were wondering how this happens or how this is made. So I was like, well, let me try making one, just knowing your yeast strain. What is it? House yeast strain, just beer yeast strain, nothing crazy.
Right.
And then how does that work? So when I looked at this, if you look at it on paper, okay, you're starting with just sugar. You're not going to do any weird, mechanical filtration or carbon filtration. You're just trying to make a light thing with sugar. And to me, that looked a lot like mead. Mead making is using honey, and honey has none of the nutrients that beer yeast need. It's all the micronutrients, all the zinc and little things like that. So I approached my seltzer making much like I approached mead making, which is you need to add a lot of special nutrients up front and kind of prepare your yeast for this more tough environment. The one big benefit for seltzer fermentation over mead is that the alcohol is much lower, 4 or 5%.
Yeah, it makes sense that if you're producing this beverage that is intentionally lacking in fermentation character, that if you baby that yeast, if you do everything possible to ensure that it's doing its job, that you're going to reduce that risk of producing whatever. They're not off flavors, but I guess off flavors is relative in this case, but they are byproducts of the fermentation process that you don't really want in beer. I was talking with somebody about yeast and fermentation of hard seltzers, and we have this idea. One of my favorite strains is A09 Pub from Imperial Yeast. That's I believe it's the Fuller's strain, or sourced from Fuller's. It's a notably estery, yeast strain. And when you ferment with it, there's a predictable kind of apple pear ester. Some people get other fruity esters that really melds well in beer. Well, malt fermentation is where that yeast was developed. I mean, it's where we kind of started to I guess, maintain that yeast, right? So that's what we know that yeast will do in a malt environment. You cannot say that it's going to produce that same byproduct, that same ester, if it's fermenting just sugar water. So you kind of have to rethink the whole, this gets kind of deep dive, I guess, but you have to rethink what we think we know about yeast. You can't just accept that it's going to do the same thing if you're using a certain strain to ferment sugar water, basically.
Yeah. I think really what we're looking at is we're trying to see how it would process, in this case, dextrose, where most beer yeast is maltose focused, right? It'll go to dextrose if you have enough of it up front. And that's how Belgian ales gets produced a lot of the times, is that they have a lot of upfront dextrose, which the yeast go crazy for. And now you're kind of selectively pressuring your yeast strain to go a different direction. That's why I would never recommend making a seltzer and then using that yeast to make a beer, because I think it's going to be a mess. But hey, I could be wrong.
Challenge accepted, Andy.
Challenge accepted. There you go.
I say we do it.
So with that, I was like, all right, I'm going to pick a neutral ale strain. I got all my nutrients. So there's a bunch of different nutrients you can get in mead making. There's the Fermade line of products. I like Fermade O. This is essentially like a whole balanced nutrient for yeast. I did that, and what's interesting with these, I take all these mead suggestions really well because they've done well for me. But I was aerating a lot and everything like that. But it seemed to go kind of slowly. The fermentation was kind of proceeding like my mead fermentation, where it was kind of taking a while.
Yeah, I'm
going to revisit some of that stuff. But anyways, I followed it like a mead. And the one place to look at mead, these kind of mead recommendations, is a website called Mead Made Right. They have some great stuff there. There's a staggered nutrient addition process where you go every about 12 to 24 hours, you add some more nutrient and it keeps churning. So, it finished out eventually, no problem. All I made to do the wash, by the way, or the sugar water, was just dissolving cane sugar in distilled water. That's it. So we fermented, and then you're left with a kind of pale yellowish kind of thing. And it kind of just smells kind of like cider, wine, mead. It's kind of it's got those kind of basic starting points. So it kind of smells like that. It doesn't smell like beer. It's almost just plain. What I think is really good about this base was that, yes, the base tasted kind of bland, but the esters and the fermentation character with fruit flavoring is where you get a much bigger sum of it than the sum of its parts. So in my example, there's a company, I think a lot of craft brewers know about them, and I think home brewers do, is called Amaretti.
Yeah.
Amaretti makes a ton of different fruit flavoring products, from like little jars of like very concentrated extracts to these what they call craft purees, which are essentially pre-mixed kind of like pump bottles at Starbucks, of cherry or whatever. So I did cherry and I did Moscow Mule, and I did some different blends. The black cherry one, I'm looking at my notes here. It was nice. It had a good balance between the cherry and the color. I also added some cinnamon to it, so it's like cinnamon cherry and stuff. And I mean, it just tasted really good. I really liked it. The one I liked even more was the Moscow Mule, because it had a really big. The Moscow Mule flavor had a big, just punchy ginger, so it was kind of spicy. And it really stuck around. And I tried this. I'm like, okay, wow, this is really good, and it's really strong together. I tried actually mixing some White Claw with these flavors, and it was not the same, because I think that the White Claw has been stripped of so much fermentation character. You're not getting the symbiosis of the fruit flavoring with it. So there's a different thing going on there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that makes me think of, most people I know who are doing the fermentation of their hard seltzer, they're fermenting just plain water with sugar, right? And then they're I guess back flavoring, if you want to put it that way, but they're adding their flavorings to the fermented liquid, right? But it makes me, so when I make hard cider, what I do is I'll ferment the apple juice, and I do cheap store-bought apple juice, but I'll ferment that, and then after about a week, I'll go back and I'll add the, primarily for me, it's a mixed berry blend that I get from Costco, but I let it defrost, I crush it up, and then I add that to the hard cider, and then it re-ferments that. Well, so that's a source of sugar, and that berry flavor is not going away. It's so strong, it's so good. So it makes me wonder. I've had somebody sent me a hard cider or a hard seltzer that they made that was colorful. It wasn't that clear water looking type of hard seltzer that you see in a White Claw can, but it had color. And the explanation was, well, this person basically brewed it the same way I do with my hard cider. About a week into fermentation, they went and they added actual fruit. The idea being that it's going to ferment that out and that's going to contribute to the ABV. But with, and so they had to calculate that. They had to account for that in the amount of sugar that they used in the water initially. But it makes me wonder, at what point, do you people are preferring to use either flavorings, which are extracts, they have 0 calories, no sugar, all that stuff, or you can use actual real fruit. And to me, it'd be a curious comparison, right? So you do like a mixed berry flavoring versus a actual mixed berries and see how they taste, see how they compare.
Yeah. I think actually that's a great point. Like, I think for me, because I kind of just try everything and I wanted to see the whole space, I want a plain canvas to then go off of, and then maybe in the future make a bigger batch of it. So less of that adding the fruit. Like, so when I make sour beers, I'm going to split a batch, do it traditionally, re-ferment on the fruit, so on and so forth. I see no reason you couldn't do that. You're also going to get different character. I just think definitely the most artificial is going to be any type of just like drops of flavorings, right? Where you smell, it's like, oh yeah, this smells like, Flintstones vitamins or something like that. But the craft purees, I think, are some halfway between where they've been shelf stabilized. They're good to add, and you can just add as much or little as you want. And then the full way is doing the fruit. So if like you were like, man, I really love, lemon lime or some certain flavor, then yeah, go crazy. Cause I think I do like the character of fermented fruit in an alcoholic beverage. I think that is a unique and usually better character than adding it later and stuff. But, your mileage may vary. Yeah.
Well, and there's, there's that line of when do you cross from seltzer into a wine blend,
Yeah, sure.
Because if you're fermenting fruit, effectively you're making a form of a wine. Yeah. So to me, it makes sense that if you want to be strict about what we call a seltzer, that you're going to use flavorings that don't actually contribute any fermentables to it. Another thing that I think is curious, and I don't know if anybody who's done this, I'm sure there's many, when I make hard cider, I do it after I add the fruit, but once fermentation's complete, I stabilize it with sulfites and sorbate. And it would be interesting, I think, to try a hard seltzer that's stabilized after just the sugar water is fermented, and then maybe added fruit to that, allowed to settle out, and then so you've got kind of this fruit juice / hard seltzer that still has booze in it. That seems like another valid way to get a flavorful, less caloric, I guess, alcoholic beverage.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of open space here for running that out, and I think that in the end, the way I was looking at it was going to be something that a commercial producer could produce, just because we were interested in that. That was what we were working on at the time. But yeah, I mean that's where. This is a whole new place to look and place to work. And I think both craft brewers and home brewers can get a lot of value out of it because it gives people, you had a friend, you had this guy or gal that's like, I just don't like beer. I just like my mixed drinks.
Yeah.
And maybe you can show them a home brewed beverage, which has just got more passion, creativity put into it, just like your beer making, but it's something that might be more palatable to them. So
yeah. So you have experience fermenting hard seltzer, and you sent me a couple of bottles to share with Jersey and Tim. This was, I believe, either earlier this year, towards the end of last year. One of them, and one of them was just the water, right? It was just unflavored fermented sugar water. Yeah. And like you said, there was sort of a yellow hue to it, but it was mostly clear. I mean, it looked like water, basically. I shared my thoughts on it on an episode before where Jersey and Tim reviewed that fermented water stuff. What were your thoughts on it before I get into it?
Just to me, it just tasted kind of plain. But I think it didn't taste like anything. I was neutral on it. Basically, I didn't love it, didn't hate it. I think for me, the thing it reminded me most of was how my meads tasted, which was not honey, but like the smell of wine or mead. But it had none of that flavor. It was just basically a blank slate. So I liked it for, hey, I succeeded in my first attempt, but I was not a big fan of it otherwise. So.
I remember. I believe the guys felt like it was some sort of a champagne or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I believe that was the comment. Yes.
And when you don't know what you're going into and you're expecting beer, when you taste something like, there was certainly flavor to it.
Yes.
And it was so hard to describe for me. But when you think of sparkling wine, what I think of at least is kind of a grapey, grape skinny. Not necessarily tannic, but it had some interesting characteristics that made me wonder how it would play with flavors like mango and all the stuff that you see at the store these days. It was such an interesting thing to experience, though, and I'm so glad you sent it to me, because I've never just outside of that, I've never just had fermented sugar water. And I feel like it's so easy to pull off some of that stuff. If you're making hard seltzers, it's worth trying. It's worth seeing, because from there that you can use that as your basis of, okay, what do I think would meld well with this? To me, I was surprised that it didn't taste more yeasty like the Trulies and stuff that I was thinking of, but it did have flavor. I don't know how to describe it necessarily, but there was something more than just water there. Again, just a fascinating experience to taste fermented water.
Yeah. I think that's the magic of fermentation, is that yeast is doing so much work behind the scenes that we don't think about. Because when we talk about beer making, we talk about the big four, water, malt, hops, yeast, but the yeast is driving so much of that flavor. And when you remove everything else, there's no hops, there's really no malt, there's just sugar, and we're not doing much for the water. So when the yeast can shine, you can see where that canvas starts to lay itself out.
Yeah, and to me, I'm looking at this going, well, I like hard seltzer. I liked the one that I made, what I called the Brew Claw, but version 1, we'll say, because I think we're going to write up a fermented version as well in the future.
Yep.
But it makes, what would be good again is to compare them side by side and then choose which one on a personal level I like the most. I do wonder. So when you're fermenting these, you said you got the yeast from a craft brew friend, right?
He just uses 090. So I just bought 090.
That's the San Diego Super Yeast.
San Diego Super Yeast. Yeah.
Interesting. So it does make me wonder, though, if I were to start with a blank slate and somebody says, I want you to ferment sugar water and then add flavor to it, and then carbonate it highly so we can get plowed. My approach would probably be to go with something like L13 Global, the Weihenstephan Lager strain, which we have shown over and over actually ferments very clean, even fermented at ale temperature. So that would be my inclination. And the hope, again, being to make that fermented sugar water taste the most like water as possible, so that I have nothing but, room to add flavoring to it. I don't want stuff to get in the way. Again, there's no way for me to know for sure those odd flavors that I'm not a big fan of that I get in brands like Truly and Bud Light and Coors Light. But my hunch is that it's not coming from the flavoring; it's that it's coming from their fermentation process and perhaps their filtration process.
I think when I think about that stuff, and this is not a we can talk smack on big brewers all the time. We don't, because we tend to like what they make. Other people can, but I do think in my head, and this is just me being an engineer. At some point when you get big enough, things become spreadsheets, and you have to save a penny here or pinch a penny there or whatever. And so when they want to say, well, what does it taste like? Well, we have the statistics from the user group that said they liked this much more than this one. Does it save money or not save money? So at some point they said enough people like this flavor, and we saved enough money in how we filtered it that's the flavor you're getting, and that's it. And you know what? Here's where Marshall sits on it and say, fuck Marshall. I don't care what he is. He likes it or not likes it, and that's it. So
Story
that's
of
how
my
they
life,
did.
man.
That's what they did. So in the end, that's what they like. And this is, that's the cool part is like, well, hey, you know what? If at the end of this, we've done this before. We have Bud Light, Miller Lite, all the big three, the domestics.
Yeah.
And everyone has to have their favorite. Well, a lot of blind studies have shown, people can't tell them apart or whatever. And really, all that comes down to is the marketing departments of these. That's all that's really differentiating them. At least now we can have a serious debate about the flavor of these seltzers because they are all actually very different.
Oh my God, they are. They really are. And there are those. I don't know what like San Juan, that Fuji apple hard seltzer that I had a couple years ago, or last year, I guess. It was so good. I would never have expected an apple flavored hard seltzer to be something that I enjoy. And it was one of my favorites. I don't know how High Noon is making theirs. I don't know any of that stuff, but they're doing it in a way that I appreciate. And so it gives us something to strive for. In my experience, the fermented hard seltzers that I've had, yours being a couple of them. I do believe I got to try your Moscow Mule one as well.
Yeah, I think you get the Moscow one, yeah.
Which was really good. You're right. Big punch of ginger with some lime in there. It was just a unique experience. But it's hard to decide unless you have both in front of you what approach you want to take. On the homebrew scale, you can do whatever the hell you want. You can blend vodka or Everclear with water and flavoring. You can ferment it out. I do think one of the biggest pros to going the fermentation route is that your hands are more in the process. You experience the magic of fermentation that we all love so much. And so there's an aspect of that. It does feel kind of cheap to just blend booze with water and flavoring, but I like feeling cheap, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's one thing. The other part of it is if you're doing beer stuff and maybe you have that experience, you want to try other things. Cider is fairly simple because like you said, you can get the apple juice at the store and things like that. Honey mead making is definitely a bigger price increase. Mm-hmm. You might not like the mead. You might not enjoy those flavors, and it's bigger commitment and things. At least with making seltzer, the upfront costs are very little. You can get in the game immediately. You can try it out and say, hey, well, this didn't work out for me. And you can go the other route, which is mixing. So there's all this kind of new avenues is how I like it. I think it's just it's an open space to work in.
So obviously hard seltzers aren't going anywhere at this point. They're still just booming like crazy. What are your plans for the future in terms of making your own hard seltzer? Is it something that you're really passionate about? You still planning on experimenting with it at all?
I think for me, I think because I tend to make things for other people, for myself and for other people, though I can't give too much stuff away these days given lockdowns and things. Yeah. Once I can get back out there and make stuff where it's a group of people where I don't have to worry about 5 gallons of it just sitting around, I'm going to make more of them. I'm mostly interested at this point when I make another one, probably make another few more plain ones, but I want to play with the yeast strain. I want to see what other yeast strains bring to the table. Like, what if we had done a Belgian yeast strain, not a clean ale, not a clean American yeast strain? Like, What is that providing to the sugar? Because I think that's where like wholly new ideas will come from. Where, hey, Belgian peppery apple yeast with like something that will work well, some of their fruit flavoring work well, or maybe by itself. I don't know, but that's where I kind of want to play next. Yeah,
that's an awesome avenue of experimentation. I think another cool idea that my buddy Brad was saying that they might do at Crow and Wolf is make just like a 15-barrel batch of hard water, straight, plain, normal hard water, and then have different like the amaretti flavorings that you can choose. So kind of like when you go to Starbucks, right? What flavor do you want in yours? And I think, again, if you're into the hard seltzer thing and you want to have a couple on tap, to just have to have one keg that people can then mess with after it's poured into the glass, or I just think that's such a cool idea, and it's another thing that we get to do as brewers, And
that's just like how Berliner Weiss, what you could have it plain.
Exactly.
There's a Woodruff syrup or raspberry syrup. You can make those really sweet if you want, and not taste anything anymore. But at the same time, that's where the cool nuances come from. And I've had a few craft ones. Where you go to the brewery, because of course these breweries have to do something, and some of the local craft breweries, when they said they're releasing a seltzer, their Facebook got nasty really fast. But those things were really tasty. They were really good. So it's like, guys, like, try it. You might like it. Maybe you're scared or you'll like it. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they're scared they're going to like it. That's exactly it. Or people just like to think that they don't like things, that it's all about looks these days and social media. So do what you want, drink what you want. I still like hard seltzer.
I still like hard seltzer.
Yeah. And the thing is with me, having 5 gallons of it around, we don't drink it that often. I'm still a bigger fan of vodka soda, and that's so easy to just pour. I do it in pint glasses.
Sure.
It's so easy to make on the side that I just don't feel like it's necessary to have 5 gallons of it on tap. And plus, I still prefer pouring cider and beer out of my faucets. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Will I make hard seltzer in the future? Undoubtedly. I do want to try my hand at the fermentation thing. I just want people to get kind of settled on what yeast work the best, because the last thing I want is 5 gallons of truly flavored, hard seltzer. So that's where I stand. There you have it. Our thoughts on hard seltzer. I think it's safe to say neither Andy nor I have any issues with it. And in the same way that I don't care if people like hazy IPA or pastry stouts or drinking Miller Lite. If you like it, drink it. If you don't, nobody cares. Seriously, Andy, any final words?
No, I think just, the final frontier was not malt, water, hops, and yeast. There's plenty of other things to do, and, play with it, explore. I'm going to keep doing stuff like I said. I think we'll have some better articles than that come in the following year about it, and just give it a shot.
Amen to that. Don't forget to head over to brewlosophy.com to keep up with all of our beer and brewing antics. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman, no.